Hello, Laura.
Hello there. How are you?
Hello.
Just trying to get all my notes put together before starting.
Laura, you don't have your great background up tonight.
I don't. You get to see my real house.
I still have no camera on the intern computer here at home, so apologies that no one's ever gotten to see the behind the curtain here.
Well, hopefully with CARES funding, we can fix that.
There we go. Hi, Stuart.
Hi.
Hey, Stuart.
Hi, Eddie. How are you doing, sir?
Not too bad for an old guy.
That's good to hear because I'm not behind you. Not far
There you go. Come on, come on.
I certainly hope I'm not lucky.
See, we've had 3 beautiful days in Scottsville, I'll tell you.
Yes, we have,
It
for
couldn't have
sure.
been much better. I wish it would stay like this all year long.
I know.
Great.
Yeah,
fall has
I'm
arrived.
not ready for winter, but I am done with the heat and humidity. So these days are perfect.
Yeah.
I think you're safe now.
All right.
No, I have not.
Call the meeting to order and see if Dan shows up. We'll stand now for pledge of allegiance.
Of the United States of America and to the republic, one nation,
Nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty.
Liberty, justice.
Justice for all.
Thank you. Calendar, approval of the agenda, report for August 2020, that's July 30th special August 10th work session, which I hope everybody has a copy of those minutes. And the appointments of the Board of Zoning Appeals, you probably all know the story behind that. Tim Small was on board, he passed away, and no action was taken to fill his position. Staff made a few phone calls and inquiries with people that they thought would be a good person to fill the vacancy. And Bill Heisen, who has had tons of experience with zoning and planning commission, volunteered his services. The part of our consent calendar is appointing Bill Heisen as member of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Do I hear a motion to accept the consent calendar as presented?
Yeah, I move to accept Bill Heisen's nomination to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
And as part of the entire consent calendar. We get the motion to, that's just part of the consent calendar. We need.
Sorry, we're getting a bit of echo on the mic there in front of
Yeah,
Ron.
it's really hard to hear.
Ron, what he's saying is we've got this, sorry, Zach, Ron's saying is we've got this on the consent calendar, so we just need a regular motion to adopt the calendar.
Oh, cool. Well, okay, I'll make a motion to adopt. I move to adopt the consent calendar then.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, passes. Next is a public forum. I don't see anybody on the screen that is from the general public. Nobody in the room with us is that myself. So unless anybody shows up in the next couple of minutes, we will go on down to the mayor's report. I emailed you. I would have reported at the work session that was cut short by the power failure, so I only had a couple things to add to that. One being that I had a nice long chat with Supervisor Price this morning about our meeting the end of October and a couple of other town-related things that she had received inquiries on from a couple of residents, and we got that all straightened out. It was nothing serious, nothing that really involved town action.
Hey, Ron, can you get closer to a microphone because it's really hard to hear?
Yeah, I'm having a lot of trouble understanding what you're saying.
I'm picking up every other word from you.
All right.
This one here. It might not be picking up.
It's a bad echo.
You want to move down with you, Matt?
You can join us on the table. I'm sure
Move this one a little closer. Is that any better?
Does this one pick up clearly?
That's much better.
Okay, I guess I have them synced wrong, but we've got one good one here.
Okay, so going back to the mayor's report. I hope everybody received the email with the report I would have given last Tuesday when the power left us in the dark up here anyhow. And I guess we weren't in too bad a shape because ours was back by 8 o'clock, but some people had an outage for several hours. Only thing I had to add to that since last week is that I had a good chat with Supervisor Price this morning for about an hour on phone, and we talked about our plans for the October meeting with the county supervisors, and she told me of a couple of items that she had been questioned on, which turned out to be items that were not really town business. Just some citizens had some questions about things that turned out to be a private property issue. So we don't need to concern ourselves with that. The only other thing I was going to add to the report is that, and it's too bad we don't have anyone other than the people that need to be on the screen. A couple of weeks ago at Farmers Market, I heard stories of political signs being damaged, vandalized, both on Antioch Road and Route 6. And we just need to make everybody aware that it is illegal if you damage somebody's campaign sign. It doesn't matter what your thoughts are on the candidate, it's illegal to do that.
Yep.
And it kind of falls under our sign ordinance. So if you see anybody damaging the sign, let the chief know. And if you hear of anybody damaging one, ask the person who is telling you to talk to the chief about it. Okay, any questions for me on that?
Nope.
All right. Well, then we'll move on to item number 5, which is the reports of the committees, Planning Commission, ARB. Might as well start up in the upper left-hand corner with Mr. Payne. You have any sort of report to give us? You gave us a real good report last week before the power went out.
Well, I usually defer to Chief Bullwinkle because as far as public safety, he's pretty much on top of everything in town. I did make some remarks, and our meetings are a dialogue. We don't address specific points unless they pop up, but some of the signage in town has been damaged and bent over, etc. And, you know, it's kind of an eyesore if you think about it. You know, I could drive from my house to Scottsville and see 3 that are damaged. And
And
so,
I noticed the one at your corner has been destroyed, probably by a tractor trailer.
well, that one, you know, that's every 3 months, you know.
I plan on trying to straighten up get the Lions Club sign straightened up down here. I just haven't had a chance to. There's nowhere, you know, to park, and then you take your life in your hands going down to it. But I'll try to get that one straight.
But I think Chief Bullwinkle will second that we do have an open dialogue. We don't have as much input from the fire department and of course Alamo Fire and Rescue as I would like to see. I hope that'll change in the future. I know they both are aware that we have these meetings and they're both aware that, you know, they are invited. But that does concern me.
You know, perhaps particularly the rescue squad now being a county unit, we should tell Supervisor Price that they need to participate in some of our activities, primarily either work session or council, to give us a report on what they're doing. And I'll take care of contacting the fire department and offering the same suggestion.
Yeah, we sometimes we have, you know, maybe one representative coming down, but usually it's just, you know, the town councilor or the committee and Chief Jeff Fullwinkle that show up. So I'd like to see more participation there, especially in you know, in this day and time.
Sure. Well,
I've got a question for either Eddie or Jeff. Due to our power outage last time, I was unable to connect with Matt or Ron about the issues around funding, and I know we had our IT guy there, which I was pleased to see the member of our auxiliaries, an IT specialist. I thought that was that was great. Good hire. Anyway, so I was just curious, what would be the best way to get the information that was missed due to the power outage? I don't know if it's here or if that needs to be disseminated another way, but it sounded like it was important.
well, you probably saw more than Matt and I did, because we didn't have anything on this end.
Zach, I spoke to him on the phone after the call and asked him to put together a little highlight of what his reasoning was behind everything.
Okay.
He did send something out to, looks like myself, Chief, and Matt. I honestly sent it out Friday. I hadn't even looked at it till today. My weekend was pretty busy. So I'm happy to forward that out to town council and let folks look through it.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, Chief and I have met one other time since last Tuesday and chatted about some of the ongoing legislation pending in the General Assembly. I don't think anything hit the governor's desk yet, but we want to be prepared when it does. So we've had a nice chat on that end of last week.
Thanks.
Any other questions for either Mr. Payne or Chief?
On the same vein, I am kind of curious to know what prompted this look into upgrading our software and hardware in the at the police department. Is this something that, Chief, you see as a pressing need?
Sorry, Jeff, your mic doesn't appear to be working.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Chief. Well, until he comes on, I can tell you, Jim, that some of the General Assembly legislation is basically saying you need to archive everything that you've ever done forever, and including videos, reports, and we need to have a method of doing that, and that was sort of the gist of the conversation.
Chief, can I ask? Barely, Chief.
Okay. Okay, is this any?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, much better.
Much better.
Okay. So our computers were purchased initially in 2013. As you know, we're coming into 2021. Albemarle County replaces those mobile data terminals every 5 years. So we've already missed one replacement. We are able to, with John Ball, able to upgrade the current mobile data terminals we got, avoiding that $5,000 purchase of a new computer. And I think that will help us for the next few years, but we really need to put a capital improvement projects in place to where we can set a schedule to replace these mobile data terminals, along with the vehicles as we move forward. Regarding the storage of the videos and any files or records we may keep. Was talking to the town attorney today about that. Any video files or anything that we create that could be considered a public record, we're required by the Virginia Library of Records to retain that for 7 years from the time it was recorded. That could be very time consuming. I will tell you today that I backed up some video, only 6 months worth, and probably spent 2 to 3 hours trying to set it up so I could archive it. Now, that doesn't mean that it won't get quicker as I get more used to the software we have, but that doesn't mean we will be able to keep the software we've got without purchasing a license for it. Currently, the software we have for those those sets of cameras that we have 2 different ones, are the free versions. Albemarle County actually purchased the full service version. I couldn't tell you what the price was. I didn't look into it. I know that I started about 4:30 today backing up just the video from 2 of the cameras. And at 5 o'clock, when I left, it was only halfway through backing it up. And that's on a 1 terabyte hard drive, solid state. I don't know how much of that hard drive was taken up, but I don't think it's something that is out of the question as far as archiving that video data. I think that's something we can do for a reasonable price. I will tell you that Albemarle County does it in the cloud. If I am not mistaken, so does the airport police. They have theirs. They have in-car video as well as cameras on the officers, and they've got it through the cloud as well.
Chief, from my conversation with Mr. Ball, he what I deduced from the conversation was that the cost to do something cloud-based would be exorbitant because I think you have to reach a certain threshold. The security levels and features that come with any sort of kind of high-level encryption like we would need for police recordings is so expensive that unless you're probably using a certain amount of storage space, it may be impractical. I think 40,000 was ballpark what he was expecting us to have to pay for that. So that's obviously not a really good option. So I don't know if, Chief, I don't know if you saw his email or if you've looked at the final numbers, but he's suggesting that somewhere north of $10,000 for software and hardware upgrades. Now, I'm not an IT person per se, but I do have some tech comfort level. And to me, he explained some of the reasoning behind it on the phone afterwards. But to me, it's just, I have reservations when I talk to people who are tech savvy because to them, it's like the most important thing is having the best technology. It's not necessarily, is it necessary for what we're doing? I'd love to have a $3,000, high-end gaming computer that I can do design software and do whatever I want on it, and it does everything instantly. But I don't need that, so I have a $1,200 laptop that I've had for 3 or 4 years now. So I'm just concerned that we're spending a little more money than we really can afford, than we really need for what we have. Now, again, if it's just like physically impossible to store that much data and back it up on just a standard, high-end desktop computer, then I understand, if that's a technology restriction, that's what it is. But, the redundancy is fairly easy to set up. You can set up a drive that automatically backs up every 24 hours. It knows what files are new and it knows what files have been updated, and it will automatically transfer those files over to the other drive. I don't think we need to have 3 redundancy. I don't think we need 3 redundant drives. I think 2 is fine. And I don't think that we're going to have a need for $10,000 worth of software and hardware. To me, that seems really, really exorbitant. And I'd be happy to come down and sit down and look at I know enough to look at what file storage you have now and be able to determine what kind of storage you need for that. So I'd be happy to sit down and look at that and provide kind of someone who's maybe a little more fiscally concerned with this. Not that I don't think that he's considering all of that. He's obviously offering, less expensive option than some of the other ones that he reviewed, but I'm a little more fiscally concerned than I think that he would be, considering, he doesn't live in Scottsville. So that's something I'd want to look at before I got excited about spending $10,000.
Well, before we talk about like spending money, though, we need to figure out, the estimate of how much data storage we're going to have to manage in the first place. How large these files are, for keeping them for 7 years, what's the estimate, so that is like, it's not forever. So what's that look like? Yeah.
Can I just state, my understanding is it's 7 years for any files that are specifically subpoenaed for evidence, but any files that are not subpoenaed, it's a 6-month storage. And that's what he explained to me. And that's what we talked about during our work session. So maybe I missed something, but that was my understanding. Unless they specifically say this file is going to be used in a court case, then after 6 months, the file gets discarded.
Well, who mandates this storage? I mean, who says we have to store data?
The state.
Okay, and that's another, case of where the state, passes laws and it's up to the localities to enforce and fund,
Yeah.
That's right.
Like many other things. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Public education's rife with that stuff.
Yep.
So not to cut you all off on this, I'm not a tech savvy guy, which is probably why it's taken me so long to archive the video I've got. So let us, if you think of other questions, please email them to me. I'm looking into this a little further as well, trying to talk with the county and get some better answers. Again, like I mentioned earlier, after talking with the town attorney, any files that we make that are considered public record, which would be any recording, not just evidentiary in nature, is required to be held for several years.
Okay.
And we have to have a way to back that up and make sure that that backup is backed up.
Right.
The redundancy is an issue because, as you know, electronic items fail. I can't tell you how many times I've lost stuff because I wasn't redundant in my backing up. But instead of taking up so much time on this issue right now, any of you are more than welcome to come down and look at what we have. I'll be happy to show you through it and even talk about it. And as I learn more, I'll get with John and we'll have a more complete package and probably better answers for your questions once we've had a little bit more time to research this. I just wanted to raise it to people's attention at this point because our vehicles do contain video cameras and that video is used for evidence.
Before you go, one thing that I want to share with council, Jeff and I spoke after Monday's meeting, and the idea that I was interested in getting more information on is we are partnering so well in so many things with the county. If the county already has these resources, perhaps we can set up something where they charge us just a small fee for their existing resources. So we're not duplicating things that they already have and that we could just share with them.
That's a great idea.
Yep. That's a really good.
Well, thank you. Those are good questions and something we need to be working on and something we probably should have on our list of things to talk with the supervisors about when we meet with them in October. Let's keep that in mind. Keep it on the top row, Mr. Bullock.
Oh, yeah. Architectural Review Board. The only update from me that's relevant to the public at this time, I suppose, is that we're going to move forward with following up with property owners who had properties rated poor in our previous inventory. We'd sort of not done anything that at once we issued our local declaration of emergency, but those property owners should be receiving letters soon. And we'd like to get COAs on the books within, I believe it's 60 days for the work that needs to be done, especially as we come up on our next annual inventory this winter.
Okay, sounds good. Laura.
I'm coming. Events and Tourism Committee met. As you all probably noticed, there's no Rivertown Fest this year, which I missed. And I know there are a lot of others that missed it at the market as well. That should have happened. these past couple weekends. But we did have a very successful street cleanup at the end of August. So we had over 12 volunteers that helped pick up trash along 5 of our entrance corridors. We had sort of 8 different routes lined out. And we even had some volunteers that were out continuing the efforts this past weekend. So that went very well, and look forward to continuing to come up with projects on a regular basis. Matt and I right now are looking into the COVID guidelines to determine whether or not we can support trick-or-treating. It's an outdoor event. There's no going inside, but trying, because of the number of people that typically come for trick-or-treating in downtown Scottsville, we would easily exceed the 50-person event limit. So just trying to define whether it's quote unquote an event, if we can come up with a plan to do it safely. Have a couple of ideas, but of course, there's a lot of ifs and buts. So we're looking into that, and I'll have to give you an update.
Laura, what on the trick-or-treating thing, what has the town organized previously about that? Because I know individual businesses have done like candy and, you know, guerrilla distribution.
Chamber members typically hand out candy in front of their businesses. So the Chamber of Commerce provides each chamber member bags of candy to distribute, and then other businesses join in. What we were hoping to do was to kind of reinstate the decorating, the window decorating efforts. So kind of bring back Harry Potter, but just the window display aspect, and help bring in some more businesses so it's more cohesive. Atlee Church typically also does like a trunk or treat setup, but that for sure I think is on the, you know, can't have cars as close together or people as close together for that too. So we're trying to figure out whether Atlee would be interested in doing something like that with greater spacing, and B, whether the Virginia guidelines would even support something. What I had thoughts on is if the guidelines could support it, we would have to come up with basically a one-way route so that people weren't walking past one another. They were walking spaced out, going one direction, you know, up to the funeral home, down to the corner, over to the museum, across the street, and back. So you'd just be doing one big L. Yeah. So again, we always start off with our committees and our events optimistic, and then when we look into the details, they get harder and harder just with COVID and trying to keep everyone healthy and safety. So the health and safety is our number one priority, but I also know the need in the community to just feel like we're a cohesive community and there's some fun events happening. So trying to kind of balance the two. Moving on, government services, unfortunately, we have not yet met, but our agenda is quickly growing. There's a lot of just sort of nuts and bolts behind the scenes within the town to look at. So I do look forward. We will be meeting next month with updating you kind of what's on our plate. And then finally, the farmers market has several needs going on. So they still need some light replacements that have completely fallen down. We're having some challenges with the birds. The bird population is increasing, and it's something we can't keep up with. So Matt is looking into helping to come up with sort of a multi-pronged approach that involves some netting to block off the cupolas where they mostly are, block off some of the larger beams, and then to also use some of the spikes and reflectors. So we figure if we sort of tried several different things in the key areas, that hopefully we can make some positive progress in keeping the markets clean and upkept. And then I don't know, I didn't see it on our agenda, but I know that Monday there was some discussion about a proposal for some landscaping around the farmers market. And I didn't know, Mayor, if you would like Matt to sort of bring that up now, or if you want to discuss that later on.
Let me ask Matt to address that. I don't know exactly where we stand on that right now.
Mr. Gritzko did a little bit more of the outreach on it to begin with, so I might ask him to say a little bit more about the intent.
Okay.
The gist of it on budget is that if you'd like to clean that up and plant a few trees, that's easily doable. Just give us a kind of a cost ceiling of what size tree you'd like to see go in originally, because they get pricier as they get bigger. But Den's committee had the outreach on it.
Just out of curiosity, the other day I went on the Virginia Department of Forestry website, and you can order nice trees from them at really reasonable prices. So, you know, that's a thought too. for the tourism aspect of things,
Yes.
I'm one of those people that doesn't mind walking up to a complete stranger and start talking. And so far in the last 10 days, I've approached 2 motorcycle groups in town and thanked them for being here. And bed and breakfast person from DC this weekend, I talked to her for a while and told her what to see around town. I was telling Matt before the meeting, I don't know if you remember the year that we had a community day and most of the chamber people had a little red badge that had your name on it, said ambassador or welcome ambassador or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be nice if council people and those of us that are, people don't know that we're who we are, and you have a little badge and it says, ask me any questions about Scottsville or something. So I was thinking that maybe that was something we could think about doing too. So, all right, anything else from tourism, government services? If not,
I do want to throw one thing out there. This is related to capital improvement plan, but it falls under events and tourism, and that is July 4th. I learned recently, I don't know if you were all aware, but in order to set off the fireworks, our fire department volunteers have to pay and undergo extensive training to actually launch them. And it's costly to participate in the training and then costly, as you know, to set off the fireworks. They are not sure if they are going to continue. The individual that was doing it is not continuing, and they don't have a replacement of an individual to set off the fireworks for July 4th right now. So this is something that I know is super important to the town, but maybe we need to consider as a capital project or at least a budget item if that's something that we want to continue and the fire department isn't able to do so with their budget and with their volunteer efforts.
okay. Maybe the fire department can provide us with what the guidelines are and what the estimated cost of that training would be, and then we can take it from there.
I will follow up with them. I have not yet had that chance.
All right, Mr. Munson, how are things going with you?
Several interesting things going on. Been working with SCAN on marketing the study and business space that we're going to be opening fairly soon. I think a key part of that being successful is letting people know that it's out there. So I got some ideas for that, which we'll probably solidify and tell you all about in a little bit more detail once we've got that thought through. But just some real basic things like, the ubiquitous banner, and getting just flyers out to businesses to let them know, and their customers know that those spaces are available, getting the word out to schools, seeing if they can make public announcements there, those kinds of things. I'm also working with the owner of the building where Farmstead Ferments is. We're looking to see if we can get a historic renovation loan from the state to get some work done on that building and improve that. I saw some people up on the roof there a couple of days ago. I'm not quite sure what they were doing, but I think there's some progress being made there. So that's really a key sort of cornerstone anchor of Valley Street there. So I think it's important to get that fixed and rehabbed, and I think that's going to go a long way toward making us look a little bit more vibrant than we are now. Something else I was going to say, I can't remember what it was. Oh yeah, was working with a minority business owner here in Scottsville to help him get a grant, a business grant through the I think it's the United Way of Charlottesville, or the Chamber of Commerce, that's offering an Albemarle-wide series of grants for minority businesses that are affected by COVID. So helping them try and stay in business and weather this a little bit better as well too. So those are the primary things that I've got going on, been up to.
Stuart, I've got a question for you about the SCAN, our work study space. Yeah. And if this is germane for later, that someone can tell me and we can punt it till then. But I am curious about what they're thinking about in terms of tracking usage of the space. Because I think, going back to our previous conversation about getting this money in there and sort of figuring out, is it paying off? I think it'd be really helpful to know how many people are there, how long they're
Absolutely.
there, and so what's the plan for keeping track?
Yep. So that's something that we're going to have the person who is sort of managing the facility, doing the cleaning between users and opening and closing. They'll be keeping track of who comes in. We'd also like to find out what kinds of other additional facilities they would need to have this a little bit more viable. So for example, would it make sense to consider putting a printer there and charging people for printer? Would it make sense to see a keeper there? Is there some way that we might be able to make this a little more economically viable in the long run? So yeah, we'll be doing that. Jen is my partner. Jen has a PhD in program evaluation, and I've been tapping her brain to see what else we can do to sort of track and evaluate this thing and improve it as we go along. So that is we're still working on that. We haven't come up with the final plan yet, but there's definitely been some pretty focused thinking in that area.
Thanks.
Okay, how about Mr. Tashi?
So we've had I think 4 meetings now, maybe 3 at this point for the small area plan. We had one last week. I don't remember what day it was now, honestly, maybe Thursday. And it went really well. It was sort of just a draft editing session. So we basically just spent a lot of time just kind of paring down on the document and looking at the formatting and layout. And I think it went really well. A few of the folks are going to meet with Matt. Some of the folks who had extensive notes on it are going to meet with Matt and do a kind of a sideline session where they're going to try to integrate some of their notes and some of their edits. We're going to have one more final meeting. Let's see, I have it scheduled for the 5th of October, I think. And that's just going to be just a final wrap up, and that'll be then submitted to Planning Commission on their following meeting for presentation to Town Council. So we should have the document in front of Town Council. I think that's probably all I have as pertinent.
Mr. Tashi, the Tiger Fuels Market.
Sorry?
Tiger Fuels.
Oh, right. Thank you. Geez, I've been so focused on the small area plan. Yeah, so we had a really good session with Tiger. We had Justin Shemp on with Shemp Engineering. They presented the idea to put a market in. This is the first I'd heard of it, so it kind of caught me a little off guard. I knew we were putting the car wash in, and there was some talk about that, but I didn't realize it was a full-blown market with a drive-through and everything. So that's going to be going in, not directly across from BB&T, but a little bit further towards the structural steel management building there. So they're putting in, they're looking to get a special permit for the drive-through, and I think for the car wash. Matt, can you correct me if that's wrong?
That's correct. The special use permit is for the drive-through lane on the market and the car washes.
So everything else is built into the zoning, so it's by right. So they have everything else clear. They just need to get a special permit for the like I said, the drive-through and for the car wash. Some of the things that were discussed were basically a lot of it had to do with traffic. Their current layout shows the driveway, the center of the driveway being about 300 feet from the intersection with 20, so it's a fair distance off of that. So even assuming cars were backed out onto, I think that's James River Road at that point there, they would still, in theory, not be interfering with the intersection. So that was sort of the analysis that they gave us. I asked about if they had done any market studies. They had not done any market studies. They said that based on previous experience with other similar locations, that they were confident that this was a good plan. My concern was that I wouldn't want to see something go in there that only lasted for three or 4 years and then sort of just petered out, and we had a building there that we didn't, that bounced from place to place to place. So that was honestly my biggest concern. I know other folks in the room had other concerns, but that was kind of my biggest concern. They seem pretty confident, and they're really good. I mean, they're a good business model. They've got a number of locations in Charlottesville. I'm sure you've all seen or been into. They do a really nice job with professional staff and well-maintained facilities. So that was, I think that was the majority of what we discussed. I don't remember if we had anything else on the agenda. I apologize. I'm a little unprepared. Like I said, I've been so focused on the small area plan that I just haven't quite gotten into the rhythm of remembering that I have to report on other things to you folks. So.
Jim, I've got one follow-up question about the special use permit in Tiger Fuel. Do they, I guess the viability question, because you mentioned, you don't want something that's going to show up and not be there after a few years. And they hadn't done a market study. I know we did a market study a couple of years ago. And actually, this might be more of a question for Matt. Matt, did that market study, like, how does that sort of jive with this Tiger Fuel plan?
I think it would be highly favorable. That market study reported several thousand square feet of demand for any niche of restaurants, as well as for kind of convenience retail and drugstore. Not enough for another Dollar General and not enough for a CVS. But so far as this market sold a few of those odds and ends, gallon of milk, a bottle of cough syrup, that's the kind of quick errand demand that you would see met, as well as their, I think their sandwich market is pretty well known. So it seems good to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I guess, because I'm also thinking about other businesses sort of around here that have tried to fill that need before that could. And then my other question about 300 feet from 20, because I drove by there the other day, and it's really tight. Like, it's a tight space. And I know someone had mentioned, how much more traffic can that thing handle if people are coming in for not only the gasoline, but if there's also a drive-through and, car wash. I know someone said, the specter of the stoplight was raised. Did they have any comments about traffic, like how much traffic they might attract? Because they want to make business. They don't want, they don't want a drizzle. They want a torrent or something, probably.
I don't specifically recall a lot of detail. Like I said, they hadn't done a traffic study to date. They had, and Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they had done a traffic study. I think they had just done a general analysis of what VDOT's requirements are for distance from intersections and things like that.
Two things I can remember that sort of pertain to that question that they mentioned. One was that they would have capacity for about 30 cars to line up through that drive-through in their internal traffic structure, and then they estimated that the 300-foot distance to the intersection would provide about another 30 cars worth of backup there outside of the parking lot. So you'd be looking at 60 cars before somebody couldn't make a turn off of Route 20 onto James River Road, was how they presented that. With regards to the type of traffic, they did also say that they would put height restricting awnings on the diesel pumps so that they would be for sort of dual axle local type trucks and not multi-axle freight vehicles.
Two things too that came out of that meeting. The Planning Commission voted to hold a public hearing on the matter of their meeting in October, first Monday in October. And also Tiger told us at that meeting that this venture would provide approximately 24 jobs in this area, and that they already have several employees that drive from Scottsville to work at other locations they have who are chomping at the bit for this one to get open so they can ask for a transfer back down here. So with Planning Commission having their public hearing 1st of October, council will get it in November. And if we approve the application, Tiger plans to start building in the spring.
Wow. Okay.
Follow-up question about that, Ron. Did they have any employment numbers for just the market versus the ad? Because what we're really gonna have to decide about is the special use permit.
Right.
So how many people would they employ without the special use permit? I guess that's something that I'd be curious to know.
Special use permit is just, here's the deal on special use permit as I saw it. Special use permit is just for the car wash.
Right.
We already told them once they could have a car wash, so that shouldn't be a question. The drive-in window was a thought because of the way things are now, and people that may want to purchase something but not go into the store would have an option of driving around the back of the building to the drive-in window and then exiting back out the one driveway. There's only one driveway in and out. The other nice thing about the plan is, you know, you've got 20 and then you've got that driveway to the property behind the Coleman property. The trees will remain there in a U shape all the way around this area, this 5 acres. So there'll be trees between structural steel and this facility, and trees between this and 20, and trees in the back.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing too.
Yep.
We have one of the neighbors on the call who may have missed our public forum.
Oh, Ms. Gill?
I would like to weigh in as your former mayor, and I'm wondering why we are discussing something that has not yet gone before the Planning Commission and their public hearing. The way we've always done things is the Planning Commission has their public hearing and they pass a recommendation onto Town Council. And then it's up to Council at that point to start the discussion. So why are we jumping the gun here tonight? And why are we discussing things that the Planning Commission has yet to vet out?
Well, I can just speak from my perspective. I was just providing an update on our meeting. I don't know. Sorry?
I understand that.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Tashi?
That's it. I apologize for my lack of detail on the last meeting. Like I said, I've been so absorbed in the small area plan, which is Lord willing come to an end here soon, and I'll do better on having more notes for the next planning commission meeting.
It's all right, Mr. Briscoe. Mr. Briscoe.
Yes,
You got a report?
Mr. Mayor, yes. 3 things I would like to report. First of all, a couple of weeks ago, we had one of our work days as a committee, which was nice. It was the first one we had done in several months, and it enabled the group to gather and to look at some of the issues of town maintenance. It was wonderful that Laura's committee followed up with a much larger group after that, and it was a good start from that event to get back in the cleaning world. I was approached a couple of weeks ago by Jamie Walker about an event that he has tried to several times have a group that he's a part of in Charlottesville. It's a group of people who are in the landscaping world, and a couple of different times he's pitched to them about having a work day at the Van Cleef Nature Area, and this time the work day is going to happen on October 3rd. So it's been approved by his group, and I will be in dialogue with Matt, and also Jamie and I will be taking a walk around the park to see what we need to do for that event. And then lastly, in a follow-up to last week's meeting, Matt brought a good idea that I had not thought about, and the mayor also seconded the idea, which was when we go to meet with the County Board of Supervisors, it was a good time to talk about the county being aware of, I would say, from the park and rec world, the most important project would be the Overlook Trail. And going back a few years, we met with the assembled park committee of the county back then, Robin Clark and I going there looking for funding and support, and they very much have supported our efforts. Been a fan of the Overlook Trail, but as a park, but it's worth, Matt was suggesting and the mayor was suggesting that it would be wise for us to make them aware of that project and even see, as they look at their own funding, that it be something that they consider. So I throw that to you as other town councilors, that it's an idea that's worth thinking about, at least presenting to them as a list of things that we as a town rank as important. And I had somewhat given up on that idea recently only because of all the funding issues. But I do think it's really wise for us to bring the county back in and to help them understand. And on a supervisor level, I would argue it's one of the more important projects of the future of Scottsville. So at any rate, I want to thank Matt for suggesting the idea and also for the mayor. And I welcome any other comments that fellow town councilors have on that idea.
Okay. Any questions for Dan? Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, Dan, I just wanted to say that I have a friend who went back to the Van Cleef Nature Area recently after not having been there in a while, and he was extremely impressed by the trails that are cut in there now and the way that they're marked, and really thought that it's been just a notable improvement since the last time he was there, and he's going to tell all his friends. So
that's wonderful to hear. And I will say that the pieces that came together, the more recent ones, came from the Boy Scout last year, who added some of the signage, which really was a huge plus to it. But thank you. I'm really glad. And there's also just been increased usage. I think COVID-19 did it well, that it provided a good resource. And I think some of the users themselves have been helping keep it up.
Okay, thank you. Item 6A, we'll turn this over to Matt right now. Capital Improvement Program Priority Settings. Okay.
So the capital improvement plan is a relevant document for the Board of Supervisors meeting coming up in October. As we had spoken in the follow-up from the work session last week, thinking about preparing for that meeting with the board, and town council wanting to be able to share priorities, projects where we might be able to work together with the county board in the future. We rather realized that we need to get a little bit more consensus on this capital plan document, which council had looked at in March and April, but not adopted in final form because we were focused on operating budget and then making COVID recession cuts. But it may be timely to look forward on the subject of capital if we're looking for potential partnerships with Albemarle County. I haven't done a lot of work on this document over the summer because so much of the long-term capital has been very much out beyond the horizon. But it's still important to think ahead on things like that. And like Mr. Gritzko said, the parks partnerships don't go away. And as Chief Bullwinkle was saying, the gear that we have gets older and continues to age and need replacement. The best good news that we got on the capital front relates to our flood control projects. When we had a capital conversation in April, we were really concerned about big ticket capital items related to flood control. We didn't know what the condition of the plumbing at the Scottsville Lake Dam was. We didn't know if we had a need for dredging. And those were potential six-figure problems that had question marks on them and made it really hard to set other capital priorities, because we have to give flood control the highest billing there and make sure that it works well. So what we came out of that, I repeat this only because there are a couple of council members new, not present there. What we did, instead of adopting that capital plan with the question marks, was go after a couple of planning grants with the state that let us complete some inspections up at the lake. So those reports are in now, and I sent them out a couple of weeks ago separately. Both the levee and the dam have clean bills of health and satisfactory marks. The plumbing issue at the Scottsville Lake Dam is not one. Everything's operational and in good working order. So there's no red flag about major work that needs to be done. There was no sedimentation blocking the operation and no recommendation for dredging anywhere in the near future. The only major work that we've got there is some tree work to do, trees to clear around the dam. Some of that we can do in-house, and as Mr. Gritzko mentioned, working with arborists and woodsman volunteers, they can start right around there and then work back further into the woods. That'll go well. The levee inspection was also very positive. There's a couple of concrete repairs to do in the out years, but the routine maintenance of those pumps, they're in good shape, and in terms of hours on them, very new. So I feel comfortable taking those six-figure projects out of the first 5 years of a CIP, and then continuing to monitor and maintain a healthy fund balance. But I'm not recommending to buy a $100,000 pump in the next 3 years. With that said, the updated capital improvements document that I sent last week takes another attempt at what are the projects that we've been talking about, and what funding sources are available for them, and how that might fit into a 5-year plus timeframe. Candidly, it still does not all add up. We have a couple of projects that are the better part of $1 million in especially the pedestrian framework. If you're building trails and sidewalks, you quickly get to expensive projects. So those are the ones that prevent this thing from balancing, even with state grant partnership and generous federal loan programs. In this draft document, I'm assuming success in winning grants that fund about 2/3 of the total cost. Those are the grants that I know exist and know how to apply for, and I'm just assuming and hoping that we would have a good success rate in them. Even with that, and spending only 1/3 of the cost of this locally, we still have something that draws down a lot of our reserved funds and puts us beyond what I would say is a healthy amount of debt service going into the future. So it's still a problem, and it really brings home what Mr. Gritzko was saying about the need for outside funding, either from another government like Albemarle County or from philanthropy in the region. So I would invite discussion of the priorities. What are the most important things? What maybe falls off of this list is less important, or where do you want to try to ask for help because you see an alignment, for example, with Albemarle County's strategic goals?
Yeah, what Matt and I talked about the other day was regarding this. We think probably, and I ran this by Supervisor Price this morning also, study this document that Matt has sent out. Make your own notes and your own priorities. At our work session in October, we will discuss it. Our council meeting in October will try to nail down a firm list. Price, have that ready to present to her before the meeting on October 26th. And if there are any ways that you think that we can enlist support and aid from the county budget for things that we need to have done down here.
Zach, would you mind muting there? You're picking up
Oh,
a lot of
sorry.
keyboard noise.
Does that sound
Got
like,
it.
sound like a plan?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't want to spend tonight talking about capital improvement budget because let's keep us here till tomorrow sometime.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do it that way if that's okay. And certainly if you have questions along the way, don't wait till next work session to bring them up. Call Matt, call me. We'll get an answer or at least some sort of information to you prior to next work session.
And it's easy to add more projects to the list. It just becomes an issue of, you know, how much are you willing to spend and what dessert item falls off of that shopping list.
Matt, is that document something that's available online or to the public in some format?
I emailed it out to full council. If you'd like me to post it on the website for the public, I certainly can.
I'm just asking. Nancy had asked in chat if that was something that was available to the public. So.
No, it's not posted publicly right now.
As long as you're at the podium, you want to go into item number 6B?
Before we move on, can I ask just a quick question, a clarification on some of the CIP items?
Yeah, if it's not gonna take too long.
It's not. I just want to understand what the word systems means. That was used in both the police at Victory Hall, and I wanted clarification because I can't make a determination or prioritize without understanding what that is.
I'm thinking about things like HVAC equipment and roofing, major building systems that have a lifespan and need to be replaced every few years. I'm not aware of imminent failure on either of those, but in the course of 5 years, you're likely to need some major work on a historic building.
So it doesn't include computer systems, those kinds of things. It's actually the physical building.
That's right.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You want to address 6B now while you're here?
Sure.
Item 6B.
The other action items for this evening are in follow-up to the funding appropriation that council made last month. We have the $50,000 of federal CARES funding received by partnership agreement with Albemarle County. That first half of the funding is received and now deposited in its own checking account for special accounting. The county board approved second half funding of another $50,000 that's on the way. Town council has appropriated the first half, but not the second half. So you have another appropriation to make and another set of funding allocations that you could choose. All of that money has to be completely spent before the end of this calendar year, December 31st. In the appropriation vote that you made last month, you set project priorities in 4 areas, but did not give staff carte blanche to go and spend money without you looking back at contract documents that would go into more detail about what you were looking for there. So I followed up from the past month with 2 partnership contracts. One is with SCAN, the Scottsville Center for the Arts and the Natural Environment, and the other is with the Community Investment Collaborative. So those 2 contract drafts are before you. The SCAN contract is one that Mr. Munchen mentioned to operate the community center, co-work and virtual learning space downstairs here. They've got that operating framework put together, job descriptions made. They've selected their site manager and are hiring second staff right now. So they should be ready to launch fairly soon if this contract meets your approval. Nothing would change in their lease agreement. They're a current tenant of ours, so they would continue on those same lease terms. The contract specifies a few deliverable items from them in terms of hours of operation, maintaining hygiene practices, and to the question Mr. Munson spoke to, accounting for who comes in and how they use the space, that if there's going to be a permanent use coming out of it, we want to know what's working and what's not. So they'll report that information to us. The second contract, oh, do you want to take these one at a time?
What's council's pleasure? You want to vote on them both at the same time, or do you want to vote on them separately? This is just the format of the contract. This is not voting on a contract there's nothing signed yet.
Okay, so it's not the details of the contract, it's the format of it. Okay.
Well,
I don't see why we can't do them both at the same time. And unless there's a significant difference in the content that requires different sections or something.
I'll ask Matt to go ahead and explain the second one.
The form of them is the same. They both use the contract template that Albemarle County negotiated with the Community Investment Collaborative. We took those same terms and conditions, and SCAN had no objection with them.
Okay.
The Community Investment Collaborative contract attaches a scope of work that details the amount of the grants and the timing of the program. So that, of course, the grants need to be made before the end of the year. They've gone ahead and opened a preliminary interest form now and have had a few local businesses express interest in it, but that's not a formal application or commitment of any funding. In both cases, there are federal restrictions on how the funding is used, non-discrimination and so forth, and then maintaining all of these records for audit purposes for 5 years. We don't know what the federal audit follow-up to this legislation is going to be, we're still in a little bit insecure place as far as the Treasury Department guidance on what we're doing here, but there's plenty of precedent for both of these programs. I don't feel that they're in any way risky as far as use of funds.
Okay, any questions for Matt? So what do we need to do? Vote on the format of the contracts, since they're not contracts because nobody signed them yet.
And I'm not going to sign them without a town council director. So if you'd like to direct me to execute these contracts, you can vote to that effect.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion that Matt move forward with executing these two contracts? Anybody?
I move that we approve the CARES Act contracts and funding.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? If not, I'd ask Mr. Unsworth to call the roll and take the vote.
Yes, sir. Just a moment. Let's see. Councilman Bullock,
Yes.
Councilor Gritsko,
Yes.
Councilor Malusi,
Yes.
Councilor Munson,
Yes.
Councilor Payne,
Yes.
and Councilor Tachi.
Yes.
Thank you all very much. The motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Now, there is no such contract for the relationship between the town of Scottsville and here, Health Equity and Access in Rural Regions. Nancy Gill is here representing here. Would you like to say a little bit about how the town can work with here on a volunteer basis without a contract?
So Matt, as you know, you and I have had several discussions on this, and Ron, as you and I. So here is in the process of going through incorporation. And we did not feel comfortable entering into a contract with the town because it specified that you must be a 501c3, which we are not. So instead, Matt and Ron and I discussed the potential of partnering with the town and also with the Chamber of Commerce on one aspect of what we had been discussing. So the steering committee voted to enter into a partnership with the town to do 3 things. The first was to do 3 educational outreach within the town limits on COVID. And part of the funds would go to materials we would need. The next was to fund the HERE guide to different services, whether medical or not. And there would also be a Spanish translation. The third is to set up hygiene stations in the Scottsville businesses within the town limits. And that is something that the chamber wanted to partner with us on. So we are still working up the initial cost because we don't know yet how many pages the HERE guide will be or what it will cost to have it translated into Spanish. So, but that's where we are. My discussions have been with Ron and with Matt on this and with our steering committee.
Okay, so what are we being asked to do this evening?
That's really just information. Those kinds of expenses are all perfectly sound within the CARES framework, and it's the kind of thing that we can buy on our own as supplies expenses And then if the HERE volunteers help us to distribute those, that's just saving staff time. So it doesn't need this kind of partnership contract because we're just asking for volunteer help to distribute the supplies that we purchase.
Okay. So there's no action that we actually have to take on this.
That's right. We'll just keep it moving.
Okay.
So that's helpful clarification. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone have any other questions for Ms. Gill?
I have a question. It's actually for both Ms. Gill and for Matt. With the 5,000 that we agreed to distribute for HERE purposes, is there a separate budget line item where we can sort of track those direct expenditures since there's not a contract?
Yes, there will be. Because Laura, we will be implementing those three things, but basically the town through the CARES funding will
Correct.
be paying for the expenses. So you will have a complete accounting of it.
Okay. Any other questions? Then we'll move on to staff reports. Mr. Unsworth, would you like to go first?
Sure. Just first of all, I want to say thank you all very much for moving forward with Bill Heisen. The BZA is excited to bring him on, and this will be first time in a little while that they've been at full membership, which I think will be a good thing as we go into maybe our first new construction in a while here in town. One thing I did want to report on, a little bit of good news that I got right before our work session but wasn't able to deliver. Census reporting is up to 87% as of last week in our jurisdiction. A guy I spoke to seemed optimistic that they would be able to wrap up the entire jurisdiction before the close of work. So I think we've had a good turnaround in our response rate from, I think it was 60% the first time we talked about that and had a little bit of a panic. So much better shape on that. The finance report that you have in front of you from August does not show the full balances yet. We just put the money in this month. But if you look at the first page on the preliminary balance sheet there, you'll see accounts 10-1001 and 10-1003 have new names. For our CARES Act money and for the e-summons money coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So that CARES Act fund now has the $50,000 in it, and you will see that on our next financial statement at the end of this month, and we'll add the other $50,000 to that. This budget report also shows the appropriation that was made for spending some of that money. And that all lands, let me find the exact, under our flood control in the emergency expense, 10-5303. And so that's where all of the emergency COVID-related expenses are going to be landing. And that's on page 7 of 9 on your report there. So that's about all that I've got on these. I'll keep you updated on those COVID expenses, CARES Act expenses as we start cycling through that money. We'll bring your attention to that every month, but you guys can track it there on your own. And if you have any questions on that stuff, let me know.
Thomas, I'm going to try my question one more time.
Sure.
So I see 10-5303 is for CARES Act expenses for the town. With the HERE efforts that we're helping support and I'm excited about, is that going to be on that same expenditure line or would that have a separate line?
I would probably, unless we wanted to do something different, I would plan on tracking it on that line.
Okay.
And we would just memorialize what the expenses were in the memo line on every expense that we made.
Okay, great. Again, I just want to know sort of what's coming forward, but it's,
yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, if there's interest in adding extra lines for extra projects, I can make sub-accounts of that account for individual things. If we want to sort of break out particular payments to particular groups.
Okay.
I can certainly entertain that, and I don't think it would be a whole lot of extra work to set anything up there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have a decision tonight, but I'll definitely.
Sure. Yeah. Right. We can talk about that.
Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you.
Sure. No problem.
Anything else for Thomas? Thank you, sir. And now Matt. Any further from Matt?
two kind of meeting update items to share from the state government. Mr. Payne mentioned the General Assembly special session in progress now. There's a number of bills that we're following closely at the staff level and with the help from the Virginia Municipal League. As you said, Mayor, nothing has been signed by the governor yet, but there are bills related to the COVID pandemic response and police reform that potentially carry some pretty significant local government cost impacts. They mostly speak to mandating that we do our work in a different way, and they mostly don't provide state government funding assistance to do it. So the Virginia Municipal League has, as typical, resisted those kinds of unfunded mandates. The bills may be accomplishing noble efforts, but if the state doesn't help us implement them, it just makes it harder. So we'll keep track of what passes, when those bills take effect, and how we need to respond appropriately, whether there's a budget impact or not. The other matter is at the transportation level. The Commonwealth Transportation Board held 2 days of meetings last week and got updates on maintenance projects and grants projects. So they heard from a package of grant proposals, including the awards for sidewalk funding here in Scottsville. That was part of a package of 40 projects funding. So the staff recommendation to the board from the VDOT staff to the Commonwealth Transportation Board is to make all of those awards. Take that.
Can you hold on one second, Zach? We're getting a lot of noise off.
Oh,
your
sorry.
camera
Sorry.
How about
there. Go ahead.
Sure, thank you. So the Culpeper District did really well in that transportation alternatives funding round. Scottsville was recommended for approval along with Gordonsville, Stannardsville, Louisa, and Madison, as well as the larger town of Culpeper. So we would be in good company working on these together, and the Culpeper District VDOT staff would be able to help us all as we do these things together. Again, the board did not approve that full package though. They wanted to wait until next month to make that vote. So if town council wanted to have any further feedback or recommendations to the state, there is still time before their mid-October meeting where you could do that.
Okay, any questions for Matt? Anything else on anybody's mind?
I got something for you, Ron.
All right, sir.
The Code of Virginia allows for emergency precautions and steps to be made in the event of something like this pandemic now. And of course, they've been in effect for months now. And there's no definite end to that. And I'm sorry for not being prepared for what I'm going to ask now, but the County of Albemarle, with their social and business restrictions, et cetera, related to the COVID-19, extended their guidelines until November 18th. They can do that under the Code of Virginia, continuity of government, et cetera, et cetera. My question is, number one, and maybe it's the only question, do we have to adhere to Albemarle County guidelines since we are a municipality? And if we have to, fine, and how will they affect us? I don't have the answers. I haven't done the research, but I'd like to know.
Yeah, maybe Matt can address that better than I could.
I can speak to a little bit about how it's working in practice. I won't opine as to the legality or constitutionality of any of this. There certainly are concerns and challenges raised in other places. In the context of an event like Halloween, Ms. Malusi mentioned thinking about how we're going to plan and organize our public events. We're working under the idea that Albemarle County's health regulations extend into Scottsville, as does their police power. That their police officers can work here anytime to help us out. And they have full police power jurisdiction on those public health matters in town limits, just like they do outside town limits. So when we have an idea for a community event like trunk or treat and trick or treating on Halloween, I'm calling their incident management team to ask them how they're going to approach that kind of event. So they appreciated that, have given me their ordinance guidelines. And as we get to an event plan, I'll show it to them and make sure that it's not running afoul of any of their event regulations. I wouldn't want the county police or other enforcement staff from the health department to come to our trick-or-treating because they thought we were doing something wrong. So that's how I'm working it now.
But we still are a municipality.
Yes, sir.
And could we not pass our own rules?
Of course.
So then they would have to enforce our rules. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there, you know.
Yeah, no, Eddie, I'm glad you brought it.
I'll say this tongue in cheek, you know, Halloween, everybody's gonna have on a mask. And if I'm 5 years old, you ain't getting within 12 feet of my candy. So, you know.
No, Eddie, you raise a good question though, and
Yeah,
I've had the same because I've been in one local business where there was an Albemarle County posting about social distancing, and I think it referenced the amendment that the county and the city both passed in August that were stronger than the state regulations, and
Right,
so
yeah.
I also wondered for myself, just because I don't know, like, do we have, I guess we all have to follow the state guidelines, but if the county does something that is more stringent, did I tap out there? Did you hear me?
No, you're
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good.
Gotcha, you're
So
right.
I think we all have to follow the state things as I understand it, but if the county does something that's more stringent than the state by an amendment, does that apply to us or not?
And then again, that's my question.
Right.
If Scottsville decides to apply something more stringent or less stringent, does that apply? Because we are a municipality, and the Attorney General hearing in the last paragraph of his ruling on the Code of Virginia and how it applies to COVID-19 says municipalities. He did not say counties or towns or cities. He
Right.
said, you know, municipalities have the right to pass, you know, certain ordinances to, you know, be enforced during this pandemic. So I don't have all the information. I just don't want anything forced down, you know, our throats,
Yeah.
and
Well-
that we have to pay to enforce.
Well, that's the other thing, Eddie, you know, in terms of enforcing this stuff, which seems challenging anyway, you know, because we do have police who are enforcers of these, ostensibly, of these ordinances. So it might be helpful, Matt and Ron, if you could get Mr. Bowling to chime in. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
I think if he
Yeah,
could provide some explanation for us at our next work session, just about the chain of command there and authority, that would be helpful, especially as this goes on and we might be looking at reauthorizing our continuity of government and local state of emergency.
And I will say, you know, in my travels, you know, downtown and up here on the fashionable West End, especially Food Line and the post office, etc., I would estimate probably at least a 95% of the people are agreeing with the masks and the social distancing. I'm proud of the citizens for doing that. There are some exceptions, but I think, you know, our community is doing a good job. And I don't think it's any problem for, you know, law enforcement, etc.
Yeah.
I want to make a comment to Eddie. Thanks for bringing that up. Jeff and I actually talked about this also last Monday. And right now our police department doesn't have their own guidelines that they follow. So they've sort of adopted the counties. I'm not sure if I've got ordinance or what the term is. So I apologize for not having that absolutely correct. But this is something that we, that there are a few things that we have in the town, like the ability to go onto a property if the owner says to for policing that the town created, but everything else sort of falls under the county. So, you know, if this is something we really want to look at, there's definitely work to be done there. The other thing is that I think our confusion as to what's town and what's county, the Board of Supervisors has that same confusion. And so if we can sort of clarify what falls under our municipality for ourselves and for the Board of Supervisors, that will really help with our conversation in next month as well.
Yes.
Okay, I totally agree.
Well, what we'll do tomorrow, first thing, is run this by Mr. Bowling. And then we won't wait till the work session. Whatever he comes back with, we'll make sure everybody gets it right away.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
All right. Anything
Thanks,
else?
Ron.
Okay.
All right. You know that.
Ron,
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
there is one thing that Matt and I have been discussing, and I brought this up while I was still the mayor. Here, as everybody knows, we are working toward getting incorporated. We are not a 501c3. And I thought it was going to be on the agenda tonight where the council could agree to becoming our fiscal agent until we become a 501c3. We are looking at approximately $15,000 coming into us to do the second phase of water testing in the region. And we cannot accept this money unless we have a fiscal agent and we are incorporated. So we're working toward incorporation. And the question I have, would the town serve as our fiscal agent? We discussed this probably 8 months ago.
I beg your pardon, that is item 6 on our agenda.
Okay, we'll move up to 6C. We have talked about this a couple of times. And what it means is that we just set up a special checking account. They're here to get their money, and then when it's accounted for, it's not, it makes their money that they are given trackable, let's say that, and not and by a third party. Is that correct?
No, what it would do, once we're incorporated and we have our own checking account that is independent from the town, we would be accountable to the University of Virginia through iThrive and to the Equity Center. So this would be more akin to the pass-through grant that the town does for the fire department. So we're not asking the town to set up a separate account for us. We're asking for you to be a fiscal agent. And Laura, you're pretty much knowledgeable of this process. So it's a pass-through until we can get our nonprofit status.
So what happens with the fire department is the town receives the $10,000 and then we give the $10,000 directly to the fire department.
Correct.
So as a pass-through for iThrive, if the council supported, the iThrive grant would come to town council, and then the council would then pass it to the HERE group.
Be through an appropriation.
I want to talk to that man.
It's certainly a spending line that you can make, and we can receive that money at any time. In order to spend it out, there needs to be a further appropriation because that spending is not in our adopted budget. We do also need to do a second appropriation for the second half of the CARES money as well. So if it pleased council to do that, you could advertise that budget amendment in the amount of $65,000 that would cover both the federal CARES funding and the UVA grant. And that's, then we could receive the check from UVA at any time and distribute it to the community group after the vote of your budget amendment next month, if that were your pleasure.
Can I just ask a quick question here? Because when we first discussed this several months back, I had mentioned that maybe it would be worthwhile to hear from here, or here's. And so we had passed a motion to request that an agent from that organization sort of discuss what they're proposing and run us through some of the ideas of what the town should be expecting to be responsible for. I think it's also worthwhile for us to know what legal ramifications are. Again, as I stated initially, I just don't understand the process well enough to feel comfortable making a decision yay or nay, because I just don't know what being a fiscal agent entails, both from a manpower perspective, how much is required for the town to be involved in the process, and then also from the kind of a liability standpoint. And so when I followed up and asked it, why that hadn't happened, what I heard was that HERES was working on. Am I saying that right? Is it HERES or HERE?
It's HERE, Health, Equity,
Here.
and Access in Rural Regions. And Jim, I am here tonight as one of the co-chairs of the steering committee.
Yeah, and you and I had talked about, actually talked about that, I think after that meeting, when I mentioned that we were looking to hear from here. I gotta find another word. So I guess I don't know that we want to do that right now, but I certainly would like to have a chance to discuss the process and understand it a little bit better before throwing my vote one way or the other. If the rest of council feels comfortable doing it and wants to vote in favor, then I'm not going to stand in the way of that by any means. But like I said before, I don't have a real firm understanding of what the process is. I guess what I'm hearing differently this time is that the money would be coming into us and then immediately back out again here, which I feel more comfortable with, because my understanding from our previous meeting where we discussed this was that the town was actually going to retain the funds in a separate account. We had even discussed which account to use, and that would mean we'd be responsible for holding the funds and then eventually dispersing it. But it sounds like we're just a pass-through is the term being used. So that makes me a little less nervous, but I still would like to know what the ramifications are of that. So if that's something we can do in a timely fashion tonight, I think it might be worth talking about. Otherwise, maybe we can plan that for a future session. I don't want to interfere with your timeline for getting the grant money by any means.
Well, Jim, I'm sorry, I'm not qualified to speak to the legal liability, but the workload side of it administratively, if this is set up to work like the grant that we do with the fire department, it's a minimal amount of work. The check comes in and gets batched with a regular deposit, and a new check gets processed from our account with another batch of checks going out. You're right. The main change that I'm hearing from this time is handling it in that fashion rather than handling individual payments, which would have been a higher administrative bar.
Thank you.
One thing I'd like to request, Nancy, if it's possible, if we can see the application for the Thrive grant, then us as council know what it is that HERE is doing, what it is that we've approved to sort of pass through, so we can speak and be supportive of the efforts, versus us unknowingly having passed through a large sum of money without being able to speak to it.
Right, and I'm sure I can get you that. Just so you know, this has been vetted.
Yes.
Through not only the iThrive committee, but also an IRB process through the University of Virginia. And Laura, you know what that means.
That's high marks. It's a good stamp of approval. But again, I think it'd be helpful for us.
I'm trying to put Jim at ease here.
Yeah.
And also, we will be working directly with Virginia Tech. It's Erin Ling. She is the state. She's with the Virginia Co-op for water stuff, and she worked with us 2 years ago when we did the initial one, and we're all very excited about doing this and getting people help that wouldn't otherwise have perhaps healthy drinking water in our region. So
what is your timeline for receiving this grant, Nancy?
We are going to implement the end of next month, well, 21st and 28th, where we distribute test kits. So we will have to pay a bill to Virginia Tech once they finish the testing. So this is actually a $20,000 grant. Here gets 10,000 to implement it, and then Frank Duke's group, who he has been so much involved with us, and he's very much, gosh, I can never remember what his department's called, but he's pretty big over there at UVA. And he's written the grants, he's done the IRB, and
Well, I just want to make sure I understood my question. What I'm getting at is, what is the timeline for when you need to have us act as a pass-through agent for?
it would be nice to, if I get you all the information, which I'm happy to do, which is the 2 documents that Laura requested. And then, you know, I'm going to say by your next public meeting, which is the middle of next month.
October. Yep.
I hope I don't seem too forward here, but I'm really just looking for like a specific date. Like when are they set to approve or have they already approved the grant?
Approved.
It's already approved?
They've already awarded it.
It is.
They just haven't given a check.
Right, so you need
for the check to go.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically you're waiting on us to approve this process, and then once that happens, they'll send the check right away. Is that accurate? Okay.
And then there's another thing that Matt has to do with the university and I Thrive that actually is good for the town, because once he gets a certain thing put in place, he may be able to receive funding from UVA for the town, not just for here. But that's another piece that is there that we have to take care of.
That makes sense. You described the kind of vetting list to be on a list that makes it easier for us to receive funds from UVA. And if we can set that up for this project, it might make it easier for us to work with them on other kinds of funding down the road.
Okay. Yeah, Nancy, that if you can get us, like Laura said, a copy of the grant and just what that entails, and then maybe Jim can talk to the legality of passing funds through our accounts briefly, or just even address that in an email, just something so that I can see what that looks like. I feel, like I said, I feel more comfortable knowing what that entails, if there's anything we need to consider with that. And then I mean, I'd be willing to, at that point, I think those would be the questions I would want answered before I, would vote in favor of something like this.
Nancy, it would also be helpful for our lawyer to see the award letter, so he can see both the request and the award.
How about I get everything sent to Matt tomorrow, and he can take care of it in one.
Sounds great.
Whoa.
Sounds great.
Matt, do we still need to think ahead about public hearings on appropriations for any of this?
That's right. If you wanted to proceed with this, we need the budget amendment in order to appropriate it. So, and that's true for the federal CARES funding as well. So if the UVA grant is 20,000, then your total to advertise would be 70, and that only commits you to hold the public hearing. So if there was something that you didn't like about any of that money, you could vote for a smaller change to your budget, anything between 0 and 70,000.
Jim, does that make sense?
Yes.
That does, because it's not going to come in as 20,000 from iThrive, because we'll only be accepting 10 of that. It's a split grant.
Oh, so then we should just advertise the amount that the town.
I will get everything for you.
Okay. But you need to vote now to hold the hearing for next month.
That would be nice.
Well, and that's fine. We can do that in just a minute. I guess I'm a little confused about the 50,000 CARES money and 10,000 from UVA. Why are we lumping it together?
Because it's one amendment to your one budget.
Okay. They're lumping together the advertisement for one appropriation of that lump sum amount. Will handle the expenses, getting that money to where it needs to go differently. But there's no need to pay for 2 advertisements for 2 different appropriations on this.
Yes. Okay. And how much advance notice do you have to talk to the paper about for putting in a public hearing notice?
Just a couple of days.
What I'm thinking about is that planning commission, can we advertise 2 public hearings in one notice?
Yes.
If we're gonna have a public hearing in October on the marketplace for Tiger Fuels and a public hearing on this, will we have time after the planning commission's public hearing on the market, the first Monday of October, to advertise to have 2 subjects for public hearing at our meeting in October?
We can save a little bit on one of the ads by running them together. Save a couple $100 that way.
So what do we do now? Vote to have a public hearing?
Matt, is there a 2-week requirement on the public hearing notice?
There is, so there will be, they won't completely overlap, but I can get them to overlap once.
I see what you're saying. Okay. We'll save money on the second ad, but the first one will have to run before that meeting with planning commission.
Okay. So, would someone like to make a motion that we have a public hearing at our October meeting on the here's question?
I
I'll
move
make
that
a
we go for it there.
I'll make a motion that we have a public hearing on the here's topic at our October meeting.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? We're just voting on a public hearing. No further discussion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
I think we need a poll vote for a public hearing notice. Anything else? Thank everybody for their time. And I'll tell you, I was talking to a transplant from Connecticut the other day, and he couldn't believe that we do this for free. So thanks everybody for their time and their service. I call this meeting adjourned.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks all. Stay healthy.
Thank you.
All right.
But I didn't even look at the computer. I had some fun. Stuart has some fun real estate for this meeting. He's up there on top.
He's gone.
You still got to get extra credit, huh?